I want to do one final thing on this series on anger. And I want to focus on what I would consider to be probably the worst type of abuse possible. And it's called gaslighting. And you may have heard of it. You may wonder what in the world is gaslighting all about. It is based on a 1944 movie that was adapted from a 1938 play called Gaslight. So Angela Lansbury plays in it. Kim and I watched it. And basically it's about a husband that begins to do things to slowly make his wife think she's going crazy. And so that has become the term gaslighting. So how I'm going to use it tonight is in light of that. But let me just give you a couple things to help you understand gaslighting. Gaslighting, like I said, is what I would consider the most severe type of abuse. It's not physical abuse. It goes beyond verbal abuse, emotional abuse. It's really a psychological warfare where it wears a person down, their self-worth down, so that they begin to doubt everything about themselves. They doubt their thinking, they doubt their perception of reality, and they begin to trust their partner to tell them what reality is, to tell them about their own value, so they give more and more power to their partner to control them. And their partner's goal is to bring them to a place like a whipped animal where they have no will of their own and they are just this scared creature who responds to this cruel master. It is carried out by people who would be in the narcissist classification. So they are all about themselves. They just get pleasure out of using and abusing people. And when they're with somebody for any length of time, they quickly lose respect for that person. And then they begin to try and tear that person down, to slowly dismantle their self-worth, their self-trust, until they are really, in their own eyes, a nothing. And then the narcissist has total power, total control, but there is a destroyed life in the process. So I am going to go through gaslighting in a way that I hope will help you understand it. If you've experienced it, you will quickly understand what I'm talking about. If you're in a situation where you currently are being gaslighted, I hope it'll give you permission as well as a wake-up call to act and get out of that. Because the longer you stay in a gaslighting situation, the more you're worn down, which makes it the harder to leave. And so it's a very dangerous thing to be part of if you are on the recipient end of somebody that is gaslighting you. So I want to start with 4 types of things that a gaslighter will do to begin to wear you down. So again, it's to get you to begin to think maybe you're going crazy and that you can't trust your own self anymore, your own perception of reality. So number 1 is they can begin to play games with you to make you question your memory. So you might go home every night and put your keys in the same spot, and then one night they will remove the keys when you're not looking and hide them somewhere else. And you'll go looking for your keys, and you can't find it, and they won't admit that they've moved them. They will let you begin to wonder if you're losing your memory. So that is a very initial type of thing that they do to plant the idea that your memory maybe isn't as reliable. So that can go in various directions. The second thing is what we would call withholding, and that simply is you try to discuss something with them and you don't succeed in discussing it. So you try to discuss something with them and they act like they don't understand you, like you're not making sense. And they're basically saying, you're talking crazy. I don't get what you're trying to say. And the idea is to plant the idea in your mind that maybe you don't make sense. Maybe you are going crazy. So again, it's a planting of a thought. Or you start to talk about something and you make perfect sense, but they're not going to admit that. They're going to say you're talking crazy. And then they're going to say, I refuse to talk about this. Until you can talk sense, we're done. And they shut it down. And you walk away with no way to clarify, no way to have them try to understand you. You're just shut down, left with the feeling or the impression from them that you're talking crazy. And you begin to doubt yourself. Or you're trying to discuss something with them and they keep changing the topic and don't let you discuss it and develop it. Or they just say, you know what, you've tried to talk about this over and over again. It's constant craziness. I'm done. No more talking about this subject. And they shut it permanently down. So those are all ways of stopping fruitful conversation because they do not allow you to do it, but they make you feel that you're crazy or you're not clear. The third thing that they do is trivialize yourself. So they trivialize your needs, they trivialize your feelings, they trivialize how you respond, your emotions, and how you read things. So they might say something like, you always overreact, you're just too sensitive, and they say you shouldn't feel that way. A normal person wouldn't feel that way. And you begin to doubt yourself, or you get angry over the dumbest little things. So again, you start to question yourself. Maybe I am too sensitive. Maybe I do overreact. Maybe I make too big of a deal out of things, and you question your perception. So right up front, what I hope you're beginning to see is what is happening here doesn't wear you down in one day or 1 week or 1 month, but they slowly plant seeds that gradually get you to doubt yourself. And that is the effect of gaslighting, is it's such a slow process that you often don't even realize it's happening. The fourth thing they can do is forgetting. So you talk about something and they say, no, I was there, that didn't happen. Where it did happen, but they make it sound like it didn't happen, so they're questioning your memory, and again, you are questioning your own memory. So they can go a bit further and go, you know what? You always are remembering things incorrectly. What's wrong with you? You make stuff up, you're imagining things. Now, they're the one that is lying to you about all of that, but you're believing it as if they're true. Or you start talking about something and they act like they forgot all about what you said before. And so they deny that they were in the conversation with you, and they again say, you know what, I think you're making stuff up. I don't think you're remembering this correctly because I sure don't remember it. Again, planting seeds of doubt. So it's a very gradual process. So the 16 signs that you can then ask yourself that are indicators that you are being gaslit. Okay, so you can check these off. Number one is that you are in a conversation with your partner, and every time there's conflict or a disagreement, you feel pulled by them to blame yourself for the problems that you're having in the relationship. In other words, they always make it your fault. They never accept responsibility, but twist everything and make it your fault. So whatever you say, they distort it and they make it your fault. So you begin to think maybe they're right, because I always seem to be messing up. And they can give very convincing arguments why you're wrong and they're right and it's all your fault. So you get that constantly pulled into accepting blame for everything. Secondly, you begin to second guess yourself. So you're in situations and you all of a sudden go, maybe I'm not seeing this accurately. Now let me just stop here and say this. Part of complex trauma is that you're going to have times where you legitimately question your perception because you know it's distorted because you're angry. or you're in fear. So that's healthy questioning your perception. What's happening in gaslighting is even when you're not in an emotionally escalated state, you start to question your perception. The times that you normally in the past would have been accurate in your perception, you now question and doubt yourself. So you are having less confidence in yourself. Thirdly, you begin to conclude that maybe they're right and I am too sensitive. Maybe they are right and I make too big a deal out of things. I just need to get over stuff. I let too much stuff bother me. Again, complex trauma, often we do overreact. Gaslighting, they make you question everything as an overreaction. And so it takes it one step further than just the natural consequences that come out of complex trauma. 3 or 4, you constantly apologize. So you are with a friend and you say something and then you go, oh, I'm sorry, I hope I didn't say the wrong thing, or sorry, I might have hurt your feelings, or sorry, and after a while they go, would you quit apologizing? Because you have been trained that you're always wrong, that there's nothing you do that is ever all right. There's always something wrong. So you say something wrong, you do something wrong, so you are trained to apologize all the time. Next one is you feel with that you can't do anything right. So this is when those subtle seeds and messages that have been happening for months from your partner are starting to take their toll. And now you are beginning to believe that maybe you can't do anything well. And maybe you can't do anything right. So you're starting now to look down on yourself even more than normal. You're starting to be harder on yourself than even normal. Next one is you feel very confused at times about what is the right decision. So should I get 1% milk or 2% milk? And you stand there second guessing yourself. And you're confused and you're afraid of making the wrong decision because you're going to get in trouble. And so the most basic decisions become more difficult to make because you're doubting your ability to make any decisions. Then you start lying to your partner to avoid his put downs. So if he said, what did you go to the store for? And you say, well, I went to get milk. All of a sudden you're afraid that he's going to criticize that. So you lie about where you went. So that is now taking lying to a new level in the relationship because you're constantly in fear of being judged by them. And that is a very dangerous place. So you're constantly trying to avoid all of these criticisms that he's going to give you. Then, though, when you're with your friends, they probably saw a long time ago that he was a narcissist and that he was not treating you well. And they might even have seen some of the gaslighting, but you don't want to admit to them that they're right. So you lie to your friends about your partner because you're afraid to admit what you're in. And so you don't want them to even gang up more and say, get out of this. So you're lying and making excuses for your partner's behavior. And that enables your partner to continue gaslighting because you're now making excuses for him. But because people are concerned and people are asking, family and friends, you don't want to keep lying all the time. You don't want them to keep questioning you. So you start to withdraw from your supports. You start to pull away from the very people that you shouldn't be pulling away from. So your world gets smaller until basically the narcissist is the only person in your world. And that is what he wants. Because now, as you pull away from friends and family, they lose their power to influence you against him. And he gains even more power over you. And then you begin to really feel that you're not happy. And you go, why am I so depressed? Why am I so full of anxiety? Why am I so discontent and unhappy? And you're questioning your own inner world because you begin to realize that you're living in a negative emotional place. And that, up till now, has probably been somewhat in the subconscious. You've been unaware of what has been happening emotionally. But now there's so much negative emotions, it's starting to come into your conscious world. You begin to become aware also with that your self-esteem is getting lower. And you think, I used to be so confident around my friends and family. Now I'm constantly full of anxiety and insecurity around people, afraid I'm going to say the wrong thing, I'm going to do the wrong thing. And now you're realizing your self-confidence is getting worse, is getting lower, and you're not as relaxed as you used to be. You're not as happy. And so you realize that you're going to a darker and darker place. And it's not a good place. You see that you're not the person you used to be, but you're becoming a shell of that person, and that person is not a very happy person, is not a very healthy person. And so again, you're becoming aware of it. That takes you further in isolating, because the less confidence you have, the less relaxed you are, the less you want to be around people, because you think everybody else is thinking the same thing as your partner about you. You think they're judging you and looking down on you and seeing you as a failure, and that causes you to isolate, which causes your self-esteem to get even worse. And then you don't think anybody would want a relationship with you, and you don't think anybody would ever give you unconditional love because you're such a loser, and that takes you even further into isolation. So what you can see is there's a snowballing effect beginning to happen as you go further and further down this road of being gaslit. So now you realize something's wrong. But because you've been so influenced by your partner in your thinking, and you've let your partner think for you, you can't figure out what's wrong. You can't say it's him because he's never said that. In your mind, it's all you, but you don't know what it is you've done. And so you enter this very confused stage of trying to diagnose why you're in such a dark place with no self-confidence, no self-worth, and you're just full of anxiety, and you can't figure it out. Then conflict just keeps increasing. And he is more, or she is more on you all the time, more negative, more disrespectful, tearing you down, but nothing is ever resolved in the conflicts. Rather, you are always the problem, and they always play the victim. I can't stand living with you. You don't do anything right. Poor me. Who would ever want to live with a person with me? Give me a crown for being such a wonderful person and putting up with you. And that just is what gets fed. His victim mentality, it's all my fault. And that takes it even worse. So the conflict is snowballing and increasing. Some people, as this progresses, their memory actually does become hazy. And what I would say is the explanation for that is what you can realize is gaslighting began in your subconscious world. Once the stress on your subconscious world got so great, it moved to your conscious world. But you weren't able to figure it out or resolve it. So what then happens is the stress keeps building and building in your conscious world with no solution. That begins to affect your memory. So when stress is too great for the brain, it can't keep track of everything. So your short-term memory begins to fail. And so now you do forget details, which gives proof to the gaslighter that you're going crazy. So now you're actually feeding into what he's been doing all along to say you're losing your mind, you're the problem. So again, this is getting to a very dangerous place. And the final piece is you start to gaslight yourself. You don't need anybody else to gaslight you now. You start to question every perception, doubt every thought, doubt every feeling, and put it all in a negative framework. Now you're your own worst enemy. So those are the 16 characteristics of a person who's been gaslit. Some of you have gone through that. Some of you are in the process. You haven't got to the bottom ones yet, but you can see that it's starting to snowball. So let me take you to the next thing. So gaslighting involves what we call the gaslight tango, or it's a dance between you and your partner, but it's a dance where you give them the control to take the lead in the dance. So they take the next step and you follow in this gaslight tango. And what you're doing in giving them the lead is you're letting them define your reality for you. So they're defining it. If you haven't heard it yet in what I said, let me recap it. They define your reality in 3 areas. Number 1, they define yourself, who you are. And so what is happening is a healthy, positive self-image is gradually eroded so that it becomes less and less, more and more negative until you feel like a 0. And that is their goal, to get all positive self-esteem knocked out of you. Because it's only then that they can have total power over you. So that's number 1. They need to define your identity for you and not let you define your own identity. Secondly, they need to define your perception of reality. And they want to get you to the place where you think that you can't even determine what's real anymore, because you get it all mixed up. They told you you misread this, you misread that, you're making that up. So in your mind, you're not sure what is fantasy or reality or a lie. And you let them tell you what it is. And they do that for you. And then they get so you never question them. So in the early days of gaslighting, the response when they say you're making that up is, what's wrong with you? Like, I was there. I know what happened. And they go, no, you don't. You're making that up. At first you go, they're having a bad day. And you can identify something's off with them. But over time, they can be negative and distorted all the time, and you can no longer tell that they're distorted. You can no longer tell something is off. So they get you to the place where you never question whether the problem is them, where you never question whether they're the ones that are twisting reality and you're the one that is seeing it accurately. So they've worn down the 3 things you need to move forward in life in a healthy way. And that is the tragedy of gaslighting. Now let me recap the process that happens. So it's a very gradual process that happens typically in stages, okay? Now all the stages don't necessarily follow in a linear order. They can overlap, they can cross back and forth between them. So understand that up front. But secondly, what they define is different stages of where you're at emotionally and psychologically. So it'll start in one place, and as you have all of the gaslighting, it moves you to a very different psychological and emotional place. So number 1 is disbelief. In the beginning, when your partner says that didn't happen, you don't believe them. You go, that's crazy. And you can say something's wrong with them, okay? But you start to believe them, okay? But it starts with disbelief, and then that vanishes, okay? So if you're seeing things that cause you to go, this is crazy, that did happen, they're saying it didn't, but it did, take that as a red flag, okay? Second thing is you defend yourself. You fight back. You say, that didn't happen. I know what I saw. I know what I'm thinking accurately. And you have a big argument about it. So you start with shock and disbelief that they're saying that you are wrong. Then you argue about it. But then you go beyond that. Okay? So if you don't stop with number one, and you go and you keep arguing, but you stay in the relationship, and you don't get out even though they never admit they're wrong, then you go to the third stage, and that is their goal. And that is the stage that has a lot of depression as part of it. So you don't even know who you are. You don't like what you're feeling. Who you are almost seems like you're an alien creature from who you used to be. And that's really depressing. And so now you walk around hating yourself, down on yourself, not liking being in your own skin even more than normal. And then that depression comes further by being cut off from all your supports. So the people who would normally encourage you, the people that would normally validate your perception of things and your feelings aren't around. And that adds to the depression because there's nobody helping you in this journey. And then you have people express concern about how you're doing, but they treat you like you got a problem. And that confirms that you do have a problem. So anybody that comes up and say, are you okay? You don't go, oh, thank you for caring. You go, I think you think I'm crazy. And now you go, see, everybody thinks I'm crazy, not just my partner. So now you're misinterpreting kindness, concern, because you've come to such a distorted place in your thinking. So it doesn't matter what anybody does, you interpret it through a negative lens. So that is gaslighting. Now the question I want to end with is, why is it that people from complex trauma are the ones, I would say almost 100% of the time, that fall prey to being gaslit? And it's very important to understand that a person coming out of a healthy home who's got a fairly healthy way of looking at life and dealing with life, if they met a gaslighter and developed a friendship with them, it would be ended as soon as they saw the warning signs. What causes a person to go and stay in that and let it take its toll? They come from complex trauma. So how does complex trauma set a person up to be gaslit by somebody else? Number one, shame. Complex trauma naturally teaches a child, the reason I'm abused, neglected, or abandoned is I must not be good enough. And so to compensate for that, because they don't feel lovable or valuable, they say I need to become a people pleaser. And that means I just agree with everybody, I go along with everybody, but I need people to like me. Narcissists prey on those kind of people. And they begin by giving you positive validation. And you soak it in. And you want it. But then they start withholding validation. And you think, I just need to try harder. And then they start disrespecting you. And then gaslighting you. But you are so desperate to get validation, you stay in there and keep trying to improve. Because when they say, if you would only change here and do this, I wouldn't be so angry at you. And you believe that. So you say, okay, I'll just try to change here. And you change, but they don't validate you. They just go to another area and say, you're a loser here. And then you try there. Because you're desperate to prove that you're lovable. Secondly, complex trauma, you never felt understood. Parents didn't take the time often to see the world through your eyes, to understand you, to get your dreams, your passions, your fears. And so you always tried to get people to understand you. Many people in complex trauma were made to feel they were stupid. People rolled their eyes when they talked. And so they have this huge thing, I need to make people understand me, because once they understand me, they believe, then they'll validate me. And what do you get with a gaslighter? Somebody who doesn't understand you. And you go, I just need to explain myself. I just need to explain myself. And they're going, fantastic, here's all kinds of ammunition for me to twist and use against them. But you keep trying to make them understand. Thirdly, complex trauma, tons of insecurities about your body, about your personality, about your emotional makeup. And so there's a lot of self-doubt that comes with, am I pretty enough? Am I smart enough? Am I too boring? Am I too shy? I wish I was more outgoing. All of that makes a person vulnerable to a gaslighter because they're trying to prove to themselves that they're good enough because of their self-doubt. Fourthly, what happens in complex trauma is you get an authority figure, a parent or a school teacher who says they love you, but then communicates to you that you're selfish or you're a burden. So you say to mom or dad, can I sign up to play hockey? And they go, you're such a selfish kid. And so what do you do as a child? You say they're right. Because mom and dad, in your mind, are always right when you're really little. So then you take your brain and you go, I will twist my brain to see that I am selfish. And you become a pro at twisting your brain to believe distortions are the truth. So now when a gaslighter starts distorting reality, you're great at agreeing with them because you've done it all your life and you are very prone to that. Next, conflict avoidance. You don't want conflict. Conflict scares you. You are afraid of angry people. So when they get upset with you and say you're going crazy, this didn't really happen, you don't want to get in an argument. Because in your childhood, arguments never got resolved positively. They always resulted in the person in authority winning and everybody else getting hurt. And so you just give in. Yes, you're right, just to avoid conflict. And away you go. And then you got that good old limbic brain. Complex trauma, you define reality not by facts, but how you're feeling. So your cortex that learns to piece together the facts of life and make decisions based on facts and evidence, not on feelings, has never been developed. That part of your brain has not been developed well. So guess what people who gaslight are great at doing? Triggering your limbic brain so that you define reality by what you're feeling at that moment. And they're good at making you feel certain things. And then you believe what they're saying, the distortions. So complex trauma, in many different ways, sets people up to fall prey to gaslighters. So let me end with this. What happens if you're in a relationship like this? I do hope that you can see that the longer you stay in it, the more damage it's going to do to you. And if you have kids, they will also be damaged by that. I hope that you can reach out for help and get out of that kind of relationship before it takes the great toll that it takes. If you've been through it, don't beat yourself up. Don't go, how could I have been so stupid? I'm so dumb, and just get down on yourself. Say, okay, that happened. let's start learning from it. I have to work on my shame issues. I have to work on all of those other issues that I talked about and begin to really turn this into a growing opportunity. And I think if you do that, over the years, you'll find your distorted world gets more and more clear and accurate, and you start getting your self-worth back, and you start getting confidence back, and you are almost at a place where you're thankful, not that you had to go through it, but for the lessons you learned. I should add just very briefly to what I just said about gaslighting. People who become gaslighters, you realize they have just as much complex trauma as the people they gaslight. So gaslighting type people come, in my opinion, from my years in this field, come from the more severe end of the complex trauma spectrum, and they have deep, deep shame issues. So their way of trying to solve their shame is to be better than everybody. But then even greater than that, in the even more severe cases, they're not going to be happy until they've made somebody a zero. And that's how they try to solve their shame. So they have the exact same shame issues, trauma issues, as the people that they're gaslighting. So they, at some point, have to come and face their own stuff if they ever want to get better. It's possible for them to do that, but it is not easy. So let's move to the Christian part. Last week, we talked about one of those very basic questions as people begin a relationship with God, which is, how do I know what God wants me to do? How do I know where to go to school? How do I know what job to take, who to marry, all of those kind of questions. So we looked at, how does God guide us or show us what we should do in our life? And I told you at the end that today I would give you an illustration of somebody that went through the very things that we talked about as to how God guides us. So it's Paul, who is known as the Apostle Paul. He was the guy that, if you're not familiar with the story, is when Jesus died and went back to heaven, he then sent the disciples out to start spreading the message. And Paul was a leader in the Jewish religion at that time, and he hated this new group of people who followed Jesus, because in his mind, they were corrupting and misunderstanding Judaism. So he went on a personal vendetta mission of wiping out these followers of Jesus. And one day, as he is heading to Damascus, Syria, to capture Christians and to put them in jail, and hopefully, in his mind, some would be killed, he is stopped on the middle of the road by this shining light out of heaven. And there's a voice that says out of heaven, "Paul, Paul, why are you persecuting me?" Now, in Paul's mind, he was persecuting Jesus, but now it sounds like Jesus is God. Because God's voice saying, "Why are you persecuting me?" So that became Paul's conversion moment, where he was overwhelmed with the reality that Jesus is the true Messiah, and he followed him and entered a relationship with him. So once he did that, God said to him, "Here's my plan for you. I want you to become the main preacher to non-Jewish people." So up until that point, the followers of Jesus were basically in Israel and were Jewish people. Now God is saying, "Paul, I want you to take the message out into the world of non-Jews." So that would be our world today. So Paul has this clear guidance from God that he got in this special revelation from God, but then God let him use his own brain. So he says, what would make sense as to how to begin to reach the Gentile or the non-Jewish world? So in his mind, he goes, I actually grew up in Gentile country. Let's start around my hometown. And then let's work out from there and go to other cities where non-Jews live and begin to reach out. So that was his first missionary journey. And he went to a group of cities that were close to where he had grown up and told them about Jesus. A number of people began to follow Jesus, but after a while he came back to Israel and he reported what was happening. And then he decided, I need to go on a second journey. So again, how did God reveal his will? Nothing. Except, Paul, use your head. Think through what makes sense, what is logical. So Paul said, well, I'm going to go back to the cities that I've already visited, that there's new little groups of followers of Jesus, and I'm going to check up on them, spend time with them, teach them, and then I'll just keep going a little bit further west. So he went through the places he had already been, and he started to go west, but we're told that, and we don't know how, but something stopped him or prevented him from going further west. Said, oh, okay, so that door's closed. I thought that was where I should go. God closed that door. Okay, south is the Mediterranean Sea. I can't go there. So let's try going north, because east is back to Israel, so it makes sense to go north. So he goes up north, and we're told that door got closed too. So now he goes, okay, God, you called me and told me I'm supposed to reach the Gentile world. I'm going to the only two logical places, further west and north, and both doors have been closed. Now what am I supposed to do? And God didn't immediately send an answer. He let Paul sit in this confused place for 2 to 4 weeks. Now, most of us know how we don't like sitting in the unknown. Well, Paul had to sit there for a while. And so he just accepted, okay, God, until you make clear what to do, I guess I'm here. And I'll wait. And we hate waiting. But here's what I want you to see. God's will is not always clear. So we are trying different things, and doors are closing, and we come to times of confusion as to, God, I don't even know for sure what you want me to do. I think you want me to do something, but I don't know what it is, and I'm so confused. And then God just lets us sit there for a while. Now, here's what a lot of people like. They say, God, I want you to show me what to do next. But what they really mean is, God, show me what you want the next 10 steps to be. So I have it all planned out. And God says, take the next step and then wait for direction from there. And we don't like that. Do you know there's a verse in the Bible that says, God's word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. And I have read, and I don't know for sure if it's true, but I've read that one of the things that a person would do in that culture when you had lamps, or that you would strap it to your leg. And so what the verse is saying is, as you took one step, you got enough light from your leg for the next step. But you didn't get enough light for 10 steps down. You just got enough light for the next step. So God's word is a light to my feet, one step at a time. And that's what Paul was experiencing. God made the first step clear. Paul took it. Then he had to wait until God made the next step clear. So after 2 to 4 weeks, one day Paul has a vision. And it's a man who would be in modern day Greece, which was on the other side of the Aegean Sea. And he says, Paul, please come here. And so Paul says, I think God's trying to tell me where to go next. So he gets on a ship, goes across the sea to Greece, and then he starts there. And so what then happens while he's there is also very instructive for us, because Paul's normal practice when he went to a Gentile city was that there usually would be a small group of Jewish people who had left Israel and gone for business or whatever. He would find a little synagogue where they met and go and meet with them and tell them about the Jewish Jesus. Sometimes they got mad and kicked them out, but he always would start there. Okay? Paul gets to Philippi, the city that he first goes to, in modern Greece, and there's no synagogues anywhere. So he goes, now what do I do? My normal practice is all messed up. There's nobody to meet with. So what he realized is that often religious or spiritually based people would have places to get together that were quiet, where they could pray and connect with their higher power, and they would do it outside of the city, often in nature by a river or something like that. So Paul checked around and found out that there was a group of people that went outside of the city to a quiet place to pray. So he says, I'm going to go there. Now what he found is they were all women. So he's going, this is going to be one hard city to crack. There's not even one man that's spiritually inclined. There's no Jews there that would meet. There's a small group of women that meet in this quiet place. Now, why that's significant is this. In that world, it was a man's world. Men had the jobs. Women did not. And so, what influence could a small group of women have to reach a city? So to the average person, it goes, they have zero impact on a city. You have to reach men if you want to make a difference. But Paul has only women. So he starts meeting with these women, getting to know them, talking to them about Jesus, learning about them, and it becomes a daily thing. But then, one day, this young girl shows up. And what we're told is that she had a spirit that made her a fortune teller. So from putting it together with the words that are used, it was like a demon or a spirit presence that would come on her in an involuntary way. And all of a sudden she'd start prophesying this information about what was going to happen. And so she starts showing up. And when she does, she starts saying, these are men from God, and they represent the true God. And Paul begins to go, here's a person who follows Satan advertising God. I'm having a problem with that. Because if they start listening to her too much, she's actually got their attention by talking about God, but she's going to pull them to following Satan. I don't want that. So one day he says to the girl, demon, come on out of her. In the name of Jesus, get out. And the demon leaves her. And the woman loses her ability as a fortune teller. Now, what is significant is this. This young girl had a couple men who were pimping her out, we would say. They were making money. They owned her. She was being humanly trafficked. She was owned by them. She was forced to do what she did. And they were getting people to pay money to get her to tell their fortune. And they were getting very wealthy from this young girl. And so as soon as Paul drives out this spirit, and she can no longer predict the future, they just lost a booming business which was making them very wealthy. And they are not healthy. But what has happened is because of their growing wealth, they were gaining greater power in Philippi. They were rubbing shoulders with politicians and big, powerful people. They were well known and they were gaining power. So what happened is these men who were pimping out this girl went to the leaders, the political figures of Philippi, and they said, these two guys, and it was Paul and the partner that he'd taken with him, Silas, these two guys, they are messing up this city. They want to come in and ruin this city. So they painted a picture that Paul and Silas were insurrectionists. They were troublemakers. And if they were allowed to stay around, they were going to cause a whole lot of trouble in Philippi. Full of lies, total distortions. They were just mad that they lost their business. But they slandered and maligned Paul and Silas. And as a result, the political leaders said, arrest them. So now, once they're arrested, they did not give them a fair trial. They listened to these men testify. Public opinion started to build against Paul and Silas. They were flogged. And in a Roman culture, you got the lash on your back. And then what they did, so you can imagine, you could get up to 40 lashes, okay? And these were lashes that were done with chips of bone on the end of what they called a cat o' nine tails. And it would cut into your skin right down to the bone. And then after that, they put them in stocks. So have you seen Westerns where people in stocks, your hands and feet are in stocks in a fixed position, and you're put out in public where people spit at you, throw stuff at you? But what is happening with that, and I've read accounts, if you're in this position where you can't move, do you realize what's happening as the blood and all the wounds are starting to congeal and the pain? But then your muscles start cramping because you're dehydrated and you're in a stuck position and you can't do anything to relieve the pain. So you're in a world of pain. And then after that, they threw them in a dungeon. And what that meant was the innermost part of the prison, the high security area, the deepest, darkest part of the prison. It wasn't like prison today. You didn't get your meals and you didn't get a workout area. This was cruel. This was dark. And so can you imagine Paul sitting there saying, God, I thought you led me here. How can this be your will? I thought if we follow your will, you bless us. This is not a blessing. If you think it's a blessing, we got a problem. So Paul is really potentially confused and struggling. And so principle 2, following God's will does not mean all your circumstances are going to turn out beautifully. Following God's will, sometimes God will lead you to a hard place. And you will go, why or how could God do this? But that is a reality. And I'm going to show you why God led him to a hard place in just a minute. Second thing I want you to see, in our Western culture, when we think of making plans, our plans often, our thinking is what is best for me is what makes me more comfortable and makes my life better. God isn't concerned about my comfort. He's concerned about reaching other people. And so that we have to reprogram ourselves and begin to realize if I make my comfort the highest priority, I'm actually going to sometimes be in opposition to what God wants for my life. And so I'm not going to be open to parts of God's will if my comfort is all that matters. And so Paul had to learn that. So why did Paul get led by God to Philippi to end up in a jail? Well, you got to understand the story of the jail keeper, the prison keeper. All we know is this. He was a man, and guys that managed jails were once soldiers in the Roman army, and this was how they retired. This was the beginning of the retire. When you're too old to fight in battles, you went and managed a prison. So you're this hardened soldier, okay? But what we know is that this prison master was starting to question life. He was starting to question all the stuff he had always believed in his culture and go, I'm not sure I believe that anymore. So here's God saying, I got a guy that's asking the right questions. How do I get the guy with the answers to him? Well, Paul doesn't normally rub shoulders with military people. He doesn't normally rub shoulders with ex-soldiers who are in charge of prison. That's not his social circle. So God says, Paul's the guy that needs to get with this guy. How am I going to do it? Oh, now you're starting to see. Well, we'll get him out here, and there will be a girl who's a fortune teller. Paul get fed up. That'll get him in a big load of trouble. And, he'll end up in prison. Oh, but he hasn't met the prison master yet. Because the prison master didn't come every day and talk to each person in jail and say, how are you doing? Can I be your friend? They just didn't do that kind of thing. How is he going to get the prison master to actually come and talk to Paul? That's the next part of the story. So Paul's in jail with Silas. We're told that it's midnight. They're in a world of pain. And we're told that they start singing. Now, you would be singing the blues. We don't know what Paul's saying, but the point is this. Paul is saying, God, I don't understand what you're doing here in my life. I don't understand why you've led me here, but I choose to trust you. And how I will show that I'm trusting you is I'm going to sing thanks to you. I'm going to praise you through song. So he's singing along, trusting God, and then this earthquake hits out of the blue. The earthquake is so severe that it starts popping all the doors of the prison cells open. There's so much movement happening. Basically, all the prisoners could go free. Now, here's where it gets really fascinating. In that world, the prison master was in charge of the prisoners, and if a prisoner escaped, the prison master had to take the penalty that that prisoner had. So if that prisoner was waiting to be put to death, the prison master would be put to death. That was the crime. That's the way they did it. So the prison master, that was pretty good job motivation, to do a good job and make sure nobody escaped. But now all the prison doors are open, Paul's included. Now you think Paul would be up there saying, okay, boys, I'll lead the way. Let's get out of here. You want to know what Paul did? And as far as you know, Paul was a short little bald guy who was a bit hunched over and bow-legged. This little wee guy is saying, nobody leave. And he took charge of all the prisoners. I don't know how they ever sat there and say, yes, sir, to him, but they did. And so the prison master comes down, rushing from his house down into the prison, expecting to have all the prisoners gone. And so as soon as he gets in the prison and he sees the doors open and he doesn't see Paul with the prisoners, he goes, it's all over for me. He gets his sword out and he's ready to kill himself. He says, let's just get it done with. And Paul catches him and says, stop. Nobody has escaped. And the prison keeper goes, what kind of man is this? Who does this? And he goes, there's something about this guy I need to know about. And he comes and he falls at Paul's feet. And he says, please show me how to be right with God. And Paul's got the perfect opportunity. So follow the leading. Let God shut doors. Realize that he might lead you to a darker place or a hard place. Trust him in that. Allow him to work circumstances so that eventually it all starts to make sense. And you know that prison guy became the first man follower of Jesus in Philippi. And then from that, he got his family listening to Paul, his friends. None of that would happen unless Paul ended up in prison and God made sure an earthquake happened. So Paul wasn't there long in advance saying, I know exactly what's going to happen over the next 2 months. He just knew the next step. And often it got real confusing, but he kept trusting, he kept following, and God brought it all together eventually. So you're not going to know the results of God's guidance right away. It may be years until you look back and go, wow, I see it now. I couldn't see it then. So let me just give you another illustration to end this up. It's a common story that's been told of a beautiful Persian rug. So as you looked at it, there was these intricate designs that were all blended together. And it was absolutely breathtaking. And a boy was sitting there with his dad looking at it one day. And he said, Dad, this is stunning. And Dad says, let me show you something. He turned the carpet over to the other side. And you know what he saw? All these disjointed threads. There was no pattern. There was knots. There was endings here. It just looked chaotic. And he says, often in life, you just see the chaos part. And it's not until later you can flip it over and see the beauty of the design that was being created by the chaos. But you got to trust there's a master designer who's working out all of this plan in your life.